Westlight, when you think about relationships that you have with God or your parents or your siblings or your significant other or your kids or your boss or your coworkers, your friends, or maybe even groups of people like the church or the government or Republicans and Democrats or teachers and parents with kids or people who are for vaccines or people who are not for vaccines. Well, you get what I mean. John Townsend, who is a leadership business coach and consultant, an author and psychologist, shared 3 stances that we all take that really keep us stuck in our relationships. And those 3 stances are the child stance, the adolescent stance, and the parent stance. So the child stance is, of course, being like a child. And children, when they're young, they don't have a lot of autonomy and they can't take responsibility for their lives, right? And so they wait for their parents to help them and to do things for them to make their lives better. Well, when you're an adult, it's really not healthy for us to act like children, okay? Where we just wait for other people to make our lives better. And adults who are in the child stance are people who tend to blame others for they just blame others. Okay. So my example is when Paul and I were first married, we had 2 young children, and I was just busy and I was tired and I was like had to do all this stuff to take care of them, right? And it was hard, and Paul was busy at work. And I would wait. I took on my child stance and I would wait for him to make my life better. And I could have taken responsibility for my own life, and I could have asked my friends for help. I could have hired a maid to clean the house, but I would have wanted Paul to do it, and I needed to take responsibility for my life and stop waiting for Paul to do that. Okay, the second stance is the adolescent stance. And that, adolescence is a very, very important, crucial part of growing up, right? Where teens, they need to separate themselves from their parents. They need to protest and get away from their parents and become who God created them to be, right? It's good. But when you are an adult and you're acting like an adolescent and you're in protest and you're like, that's not fair, that's not right, and I can't believe they did it, and you're constantly in protest, then that's really going to keep us stuck and keep us from being the healthy and mature adults that we are. So in my life, growing up as growing into my leadership, I had a number of male adults who were of the traditional top-down leadership style that was very successful and effective in that era. Okay. But I protested that style because that was not me, and I did not want to be that, and I made them all bad, right? Like I protested them, I protested their style of leadership, I protested their helping me, I even protested their desire to want to help me. And my therapist will tell you that I have unresolved issues with my father, and I protest him. No, I'm just kidding. I listen to him. And I'm understanding that it's not all bad or all good. That there are times when that leadership style is necessary. And maybe if I were my best adult, mature, healthy self, I would have listened to them and I would have learned from them and taken what I could, because I'm going to need that leadership style in certain situations. So the third stance is the parent stance, which, being a parent, as we all know, is not a bad thing. There are times when we have young children where we need to provide safe and controlled spaces for them, so for their benefit, and we need to teach and tell them what to do, and we are one up over them because we're the parent. When we are talking about adult to adult relationships, we don't want to have that parent stance. And people with the parent stance are usually very controlling, they like to micromanage, and they're very critical. And that stance will keep us immobilized and really keep us from being the healthy and mature adults that we are. I couldn't think of a specific situation, but I notice that when I do not voice my opinion or my perspective, maybe because that person really isn't interested, or it wouldn't make a difference, or maybe I'm afraid to tell them because I don't want to be different from them. I'm afraid I'm going to offend them, or my people pleasing gets in the way. When I'm in those situations, I just am critical and I try to control and micromanage. Okay, so these three stances, being helpless, feeling, and being in protest and being critical, they all immobilize us and keep us from really genuinely and authentically listening and sharing with one another. It keeps us from coming up, creating a mutually beneficial solution. It keeps us from practicing healthy boundaries. And it keeps us from really understanding that we all have our strengths and use those strengths to benefit our relationships. What I want to encourage you to do is to think about which stances that you take and when, and how are these stances keeping you stuck and immobilizing you. Remember, child stance, adolescent stance, and parent stance. And I hope you guys can discuss it with others. And I hope that it'll help you become the mature and healthy adult that you are.